The population of Brazil is heavily concentrated in the southeastern, 79.8 million inhabitants, and northeastern, 53.5 million inhabitants, regions, while the two most extensive regions, the center-west and the north, which together make up 64.12% of the Brazilian territory, have a total of only 29.1 million inhabitants. From the 19th century, Brazil opened its borders to immigration. About 5 million people from over 60 countries migrated to Brazil between 1808 and 1972, most of them of Portuguese, Italian, Spanish, German, Ukrainian, Polish, Jewish, Armenian, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, and Arab origin. Brazil has the second largest Jewish community in Latin America, making up 0.06% of its population. Brazil also has the largest Arab, or Arab ancestry, community in the world outside the Arab world, with 15 to 20 million people. Christianity is the country's predominant faith, with Roman Catholicism being its largest denomination. Brazil has the world's largest Catholic population. Religion in Brazil was formed from the meeting of the Catholic Church with the religious traditions of enslaved African peoples and indigenous peoples. Religious pluralism increased during the 20th century, and the Protestant community has grown to include over 22% of the population. The most common Protestant denominations are evangelical Pentecostal ones. Other Protestant branches with a notable presence in the country include the Baptists, Seventh-day Adventists, Lutherans, and the Reformed tradition. The Brazilian public health system, the unified health system, is managed and provided by all levels of government, being the largest system of this type in the world. On the other hand, private healthcare systems play a complementary role. Brazil's private institutions tend to be more exclusive and offer better quality education, so many high-income families send their children there. The result is a segregated educational system that reflects extreme income disparities and reinforces social inequality. However, efforts to change this are making impacts. The University of São Paulo is the second best university in Latin America, according to recent 2019 QS World University Rankings. Of the top 20 Latin American universities, 8 are Brazilian. Most of them are public. Attending an institution of higher education is required by law of guidelines and bases of education. Kindergarten, elementary, and medium education are required of all students. The official language of Brazil is Portuguese, Article 13 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Brazil, which almost all of the population speaks and is virtually the only language used in newspapers, radio, television, and for business and administrative purposes. Brazil is the only Portuguese-speaking nation in the Americas, making the language an important part of Brazilian national identity and giving it a national culture distinct from those of its Spanish-speaking neighbors. The core culture of Brazil is derived from Portuguese culture, because of its strong colonial ties with the Portuguese Empire. The national beverage is coffee, and cachaça is Brazil's native liquor. Cachaça is distilled from sugar cane and is the main ingredient in the national cocktail, caipirinha. A typical meal consists mostly of rice and beans with beef, salad, French fries, and a fried egg. By the mid-1960s, Brazilian universities had installed mainframe computers from IBM, and Burroughs Large Systems. In the 1970s and 1980s, the Brazilian government restricted foreign imports to protect the local manufacturing of computers. In the 1980s, Brazil produced half of the computers sold in the country. By 2009, the mobile phone and internet use of Brazil was the 5th largest in the world. In May 2010, the Brazilian government launched TV Brasil Internacional, an international television station, initially broadcasting to 49 countries. The most popular sport in Brazil is football. The Brazilian men's national team is ranked among the best in the world according to the FIFA World Rankings, and has won the World Cup tournament a record 5 times. Volleyball, basketball, auto racing, and martial arts also attract large audiences. The Brazil men's national volleyball team, for example, currently holds the titles of the World League, World Grand Champions Cup, World Championship, and the World Cup. In auto racing, 3 Brazilian drivers have won the Formula One World Championship 8 times. The country has also produced significant achievements in other sports such as sailing, swimming, tennis, surfing, skateboarding, MMA, gymnastics, boxing, judo, athletics and table tennis. Some sport variations have their origins in Brazil: beach football, futsal, indoor football, and foot volley emerged in Brazil as variations of football. In martial arts, Brazilians developed capoeira, vale tudo, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Brazil has hosted several high-profile international sporting events, like the 1950 FIFA World Cup, and recently has hosted the 2014 FIFA World Cup, 2019 Copa America and 2021 Copa America. The São Paulo Circuit, Autodromo José Carlos Pace, hosts the annual Grand Prix of Brazil. São Paulo organized the 4 Pan American Games in 1963, and Rio de Janeiro hosted the 15 Pan American Games in 2007. On October 2, 2009, Rio de Janeiro was selected to host the 2016 Olympic Games and 2016 Paralympic Games, making it the first South American city to host the Games and second in Latin America, after Mexico City. Furthermore, the country hosted the FIBA Basketball World Cups in 1954 and 1963. At the 1963 event, the Brazil national basketball team won one of its 2 world championship titles. Brazil invented some variations of football, such as beach soccer and foot volley. Futsal, having been invented in Uruguay, neighboring Brazil, is also widely practiced in the country, mainly in the state of Rio Grande do Sul, neighboring Uruguay. In futsal, Brazil is one of the greatest world powers. Before the FIFA era, there were 3 World Cups, organized by the former International Federation of Indoor Soccer, FIFUSA, where Brazil was world champion twice. Brazil is the biggest champion of the FIFA Futsal World Cup, with 5 titles. Falcao is the most renowned male Brazilian player. 3. In beach soccer, Brazil is among the world's greatest powers, being the biggest champion of the FIFA Beach Soccer World Cup, with 5 titles. In addition, it has 9 world titles from the former competition organized by Beach Soccer Worldwide, BSWW, the Beach Soccer World Championships. Foot volley is a recreational sport widely practiced on Brazilian beaches, mainly in Rio de Janeiro, where it was invented. It was created by Octavio de Moraes in the 1970s. It is a mix of football and volleyball, where the players must use their feet and head to get the ball over the net and into the opponent's side, and is played on the beaches. It is one of the most popular beach sports in Brazil. Foot volley started out with 5 players on each team but later got cut to 2 players on each team and is still so to this day. Capoeira is an Afro-Brazilian martial art that combines elements of dance and music, and is marked by deft, tricky movements that are often played on the ground or completely inverted. It also has a strong acrobatic component in some versions and is always played with music. It is a culturally significant sport, developed in colonial times by slaves. Nowadays, capoeira is practiced internationally and found its way into popular culture, through many computer games and movies. Following more than 3 centuries under Portuguese rule, Brazil gained its independence in 1822, maintaining a monarchical system of government until the abolition of slavery in 1888 and the subsequent proclamation of a republic by the military in 1889. Brazilian coffee exporters politically dominated the country until populist leader Getulio Vargas rose to power in 1930. Vargas governed over various versions of democratic and authoritarian regimes from 1930 to 1945. Democratic rule returned, including a democratically elected Vargas administration from 1951 to 1955, and lasted until 1964, when the military overthrew President João Goulart. The military regime censored journalists and repressed and tortured dissidents in the late 1960s and early 1970s. The dictatorship lasted until 1985, when the military regime peacefully ceded power to civilian rulers, and the Brazilian Congress passed its current constitution in 1989. By far the largest and most populous country in South America, Brazil continues to pursue industrial and agricultural growth and development of its interior. Having successfully weathered a period of global financial difficulty in the late 20th century, under President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, 2003 to 2010, Brazil was seen as one of the world's strongest emerging markets and a contributor to global growth. The awarding of the 2014 FIFA World Cup and 2016 Summer Olympic Games, the first ever to be held in South America, was symbolic of the country's rise. However, from about 2013 to 2016, Brazil was plagued by a sagging economy, high unemployment, and high inflation, only emerging from recession in 2017. Former President Dilma Rousseff, 2011 to 2016, was removed from office in 2016 by Congress for having committed impeachable acts against Brazil's budgetary laws, and her vice president, Michel Temer, served the remainder of her second term. A money laundering investigation, Operation Lava Jato, uncovered a vast corruption scheme and prosecutors charged several high-profile Brazilian politicians with crimes. Former President Lula was convicted of accepting bribes and served jail time, 2018 to 19, although his conviction was overturned in early 2021. Lula's revival became complete in October 2022 when he narrowly defeated incumbent Jair Bolsonaro, 2019 to 2022, in the presidential election. Location of Brazil, Eastern South America, bordering the Atlantic Ocean. Area of Brazil, total, 8,515,770 sq.km land, 8,358,140 square kilometers, water, 157,630 square kilometers. Note, includes Arquipélago de Fernando de Noronha, Atoll das Rocas, Ilha de Trindade, Ilhas Martin Vaz, and Pindas de São Pedro e São Paulo. Area, comparative slightly smaller than the U.S. Land boundaries total, 16,145 kilometers. Border countries, 10 Argentina 1,263 kilometers, Bolivia 3,403 kilometers, Colombia 1,790 kilometers, French Guiana 649 kilometers, Guyana 1,308 kilometers, Paraguay 1,371 kilometers, Peru 2,659 kilometers, Suriname 515 kilometers, Uruguay 1,050 kilometers, Venezuela 2,137 kilometers. Natural resources, alumina, bauxite, beryllium, gold, iron ore, manganese, nickel, niobium, phosphates, platinum, tantalum, tin, rare earth elements, uranium, petroleum, hydropower, timber. Major lakes, area sq.km. Freshwater lake, S. Lagoa dos Patos, 10,140 square kilometers. Saltwater lake, S. Lagoa Mirim, shared with Uruguay, 2,970 square kilometers. Major rivers, by length in km. Amazon River mouth, shared with Peru s. 6,400 kilometers, Rio de la Plata/Parana River source, shared with Paraguay, Argentina, and Uruguay m. 4,880 kilometers, Tocantins, 3,650 kilometers, São Francisco, 3,180 kilometers, Paraguay River source, shared with Argentina and Paraguay m. 2,549 kilometers, Rio Negro River mouth, shared with Colombia s. and Venezuela, 2,250 kilometers, Uruguay River source, shared with Argentina and Uruguay m. 1,610 kilometers. Note, S after country name indicates river source, M after country name indicates river mouth. Major watersheds, area sq.km. Atlantic Ocean drainage, Amazon, 6,145,186 square kilometers, Orinoco, 953,675 square kilometers, Parana, 2,582,704 square kilometers, São Francisco, 617,814 square kilometers, Tocantins, 764,213 square kilometers. Major aquifers: Amazon Basin, Guarani Aquifer System, Maranhão Basin. Population distribution: the vast majority of people live along, or relatively near, the Atlantic coast in the east. The population core is in the southeast, anchored by the cities of São Paulo, Brasília, and Rio de Janeiro. Natural hazards: recurring droughts in northeast, floods and occasional frost in south. Geography, note. Note 1, largest country in South America and in the southern hemisphere, shares common boundaries with every South American country except Chile and Ecuador. Most of the Pantanal, the world's largest tropical wetland, extends through the west-central part of the country, shares Iguazu Falls, the world's largest waterfall system, with Argentina. Note 2, cassava, manioc, the sixth most important food crop in the world, after maize, rice, wheat, potatoes, and soybeans, seems to have originated in the west-central part of Brazil. Pineapples are probably indigenous to the southern Brazil-Paraguay region. Note 3, Rocas Atoll, located off the northeast coast of Brazil, is the only atoll in the South Atlantic. Population: 218,689,757, 2023 EST, comparison ranking, 7. Nationality: noun, Brazilian, s. Adjective, Brazilian. Languages: Portuguese, official and most widely spoken language. Note, less common languages include Spanish, border areas and schools, German, Italian, Japanese, English, and a large number of minor Amerindian languages. Religions: Roman Catholic 50%, Evangelical 31%, Spiritist 3%, Umbanda, Candomblé, or other Afro-Brazilian religions 2%, Jewish 0.3%, Atheist 1%, other 2%, none 10%, 2020 EST. Demographic profile: Brazil's rapid fertility decline since the 1960s is the main factor behind the country's slowing population growth rate, aging population, and fast-paced demographic transition. Brasília has not taken full advantage of its large working-age population to develop its human capital and strengthen its social and economic institutions, but is funding a study abroad program to bring advanced skills back to the country. The current favorable age structure will begin to shift around 2025, with the labor force shrinking and the elderly starting to compose an increasing share of the total population. Well-funded public pensions have nearly wiped out poverty among the elderly, and Bolsa Familia and other social programs have lifted tens of millions out of poverty. More than half of Brazil's population is considered middle class, but poverty and income inequality levels remain high. The Northeast, North, and Center-West, women, and black, mixed race, and indigenous populations are disproportionately affected. Disparities in opportunities foster social exclusion and contribute to Brazil's high crime rate, particularly violent crime in cities and favelas, slums. Brazil has traditionally been a net recipient of immigrants, with its southeast being the prime destination. After the importation of African slaves was outlawed in the mid-19th century, Brazil sought Europeans, Italians, Portuguese, Spaniards, and Germans, and later Asians, Japanese, to work in agriculture, especially coffee cultivation. Recent immigrants come mainly from Argentina, Chile, and Andean countries. Many are unskilled illegal migrants, or are returning Brazilian nationals. Since Brazil's economic downturn in the 1980s, emigration to the United States, Europe, and Japan has been rising but is negligible relative to Brazil's total population. The majority of these emigrants are well educated and middle class. Fewer Brazilian peasants are emigrating to neighboring countries to take up agricultural work. Population distribution. The vast majority of people live along, or relatively near, the Atlantic coast in the east. The population core is in the southeast, anchored by the cities of São Paulo, Brasília, and Rio de Janeiro. Urbanization. Urban population, 87.8% of total population, 2023. Rate of urbanization, 0.87% annual rate of change, 2020 to 25 EST. Major urban areas, population. 22.620 million São Paulo, 13.728 million Rio de Janeiro, 6.248 million Belo Horizonte, 4.873 million Brasília, capital, 4.264 million Recife, 4.212 million Porto Alegre, 2023. It is most well known for its dense forests, including the Amazon, the world's largest jungle, in the north. But there are also dry grasslands, called pampas, rugged hills, pine forests, sprawling wetlands, immense plateaus, and a long coastal plain. Deforestation in Amazon basin destroys the habitat and endangers a multitude of plant and animal species indigenous to the area, illegal wildlife trade, illegal poaching, air and water pollution in Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, and several other large cities, land degradation and water pollution caused by improper mining activities, wetland degradation, severe oil spills. Thank you for watching this video.